He had more financial knowledge than anyone in the room. MBA from Wharton. 10 years on Wall Street. Could recite compound interest formulas in his sleep. Understood options, derivatives, hedge fund mechanics, the entire architecture of modern finance. And he was completely broke. Not struggling. Broke. Credit cards maxed. Savings empty. Behind on rent. While his colleagues who knew half of what he knew were buying their second homes. His name was not important. What is important is what he said when someone finally asked him why. He said, "I knew everything about money. I just did not know anything about myself." That sentence is the entire video. But you need to understand what it actually means, because it is going to change how you think about every financial decision you make for the rest of your life. If you cannot sit through a video that rewires your entire relationship with money, go watch TikTok and stay broke. Or stay right here for the next 15 minutes, because what is coming is not what you think. Here is the thing nobody told you about money. It is not a math problem. This sounds obvious until you realize what it means. Because if it were a math problem, every person who understood compound interest would be rich. Every economics professor would be wealthy. Every financial advisor would have retired at 40. But most of them have not. And that should bother you far more than it does. Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002. Not for discovering a new investment strategy. Not for predicting market movements. He won it for proving that human beings are systematically, predictably, and unavoidably irrational with money. And the specific way they're irrational has a name. Loss aversion. Here is what Kahneman and Amos Tversky discovered that changed everything. People feel the pain of losing money 2.5 times more intensely than they feel the pleasure of gaining the same amount. 2.5 times. That is not a small quirk. That is a structural defect in the human brain that affects every single financial decision you have ever made. Think about that for a second, because the implications are insane. If you invest $1,000 and it drops $200, the pain you feel is equivalent to someone handing you $500 and then taking it back. But nothing actually happened. The money is still there. It is just worth less on paper today than it was yesterday. And that pain, that completely disproportionate response to a temporary number on a screen, is what causes people to sell at exactly the wrong time and destroy years of compounding in a single panicked decision. But wait. That is not even the strangest part. The strange part is what happened in a study from Harvard in the 1990s that nobody talks about. Researchers asked people a simple question. Would you rather earn $70,000 a year in a town where everyone else earns $60,000? Or earn $85,000 a year in a town where everyone else earns $100,000? The rational answer is obvious. Take the $85,000. More money. Better life. No question. The majority of people chose the $70,000. They would literally accept less money in exchange for being richer than the people around them. Let that sink in. Real, actual, spendable money. Left on the table. Because of how it looked relative to other people. This is not stupidity. This is wiring. The human brain did not evolve to maximize absolute wealth. It evolved to maximize social status within a group. And social status is measured relatively, not absolutely. Your ancient ancestor did not need to be the richest person on earth. He needed to be higher than the guy in the next cave. That instinct did not disappear. It just moved into your Amazon cart and your car payment and the apartment that is slightly nicer than you actually need. And here is what nobody has fully explained to you about this. Every luxury purchase that is driven by that instinct is not really a purchase. It is a tax. A status tax. Paid automatically, emotionally, and invisibly, every time you make a financial decision with your status in mind instead of your future in mind. The Wharton MBA knew all of this intellectually. He could explain it perfectly. He just could not stop doing it. Because knowing about a bias and overcoming it are two completely different things. And this is where the psychology gets genuinely terrifying. There is something called the Dunning-Kruger effect in financial markets. Studies of investor behavior consistently find that the vast majority of individual investors rate their own investing ability as above average. Which is, obviously, a statistical impossibility. You cannot have a room where 60% of people are above average. But 60% of people in the room will tell you they are. What this produces in practice is excessive trading. The confident investor makes more moves. More moves mean more transaction costs. More transaction costs mean worse returns. The research is unambiguous. Overconfident investors consistently underperform the market by larger margins than investors who do almost nothing. The person who bought an index fund in 2010 and never looked at it again outperformed the person who spent a decade watching CNBC and making strategic adjustments. Doing less beat doing more. But here is what makes this psychologically brutal. The more you learn about investing, the more confident you become. And the more confident you become, the more likely you are to make the exact mistakes that are going to cost you the most money. The knowledge creates the problem. Stay with me, because it goes deeper. There is a concept in behavioral finance called mental accounting. It sounds academic. It is not. It is the reason you have simultaneously paid 20% interest on a credit card balance while keeping a savings account earning 2% on the side, and felt completely fine about it. Mental accounting is the brain's tendency to create separate psychological buckets for money that is objectively the same money. Your tax refund feels different from your paycheck, even if the amounts are identical. Money you win gambling feels different from money you earned. A $100 bill you find in an old coat feels different from a $100 bill you worked for. And because they feel different, you spend them differently. The tax refund gets blown on something you would never buy with a paycheck. The found money goes to something frivolous. The gambling winnings go straight back into more gambling. The money does not know where it came from. Your brain does not care. It treats money differently based on how it arrived, which means your financial behavior is being silently controlled by a system of emotional accounting that has nothing to do with actual math. And the investment industry knows this. They know it so well they have built products specifically designed to exploit it. The $5 subscription that never feels like $60 a year. The daily coffee that never registers as $1,800 annually. The monthly car payment that feels manageable while disguising the true annual cost of ownership. Every one of these structures is designed to exploit mental accounting. To make the money you are spending feel smaller than it is by chopping it into units that fit comfortably into the wrong psychological bucket. If you are not subscribed to this channel yet, do it now, because we are about to get to the part that most people spend their entire lives never understanding. Here is what the research actually says about who gets rich. Not what they invest in. Who they actually are. A 2025 study published in the SSRN by researchers drawing from behavioral economics and Harvard economic psychology data found that the single greatest predictor of wealth accumulation was not income, not education, not starting capital. It was the ability to delay gratification. One behavioral metric. The willingness to accept a smaller reward now in exchange for a larger reward later. That single trait explained more of the variance in wealth outcomes than education level, family background, initial income, or any investment strategy. You already know where I am going with this because you have heard about the marshmallow experiment. But here is the part the popular version of that story leaves out. The original Stanford researchers followed the children from the marshmallow experiment into adulthood. They measured their financial outcomes, their relationship outcomes, their physical health. Across every single dimension of adult life, the ability to wait for the second marshmallow at age 4 predicted better outcomes at age 40. Not because the marshmallow experiment created the outcome, but because it revealed something about how those brains were wired. And wiring is not fixed. That is the part that changes everything. Because here is what nobody tells you about psychological wiring. It is malleable. The research on neuroplasticity confirms that adult brains are not fixed systems. They are responsive systems. The circuits that drive financial behavior can be reinforced or weakened depending on what you repeatedly do. Every time you delay a purchase and the world does not end, your brain recalibrates its threat response to that purchase. Every time you automate an investment and live normally on what is left, your brain begins to treat the invested amount as money that was never available to spend. Every time you make a decision based on your 10-year future instead of your 10-minute feeling, the neural pathway connecting present behavior to future reward gets slightly stronger. But here is the brutal catch that the self-help version of this story never mentions. This only works if the behavior is consistent enough to override the default wiring. One act of delayed gratification does not rewire anything. 10 acts do not rewire anything. The research suggests it takes months of consistent behavior before the new pathway becomes the path of least resistance. Before the investment transfer feels automatic rather than painful. Before the expensive restaurant feels less appealing than the compounding account. Before the brain genuinely starts experiencing long-term thinking as more satisfying than short-term consumption. Which means the gap between knowing this and doing this is not knowledge. It is time. And most people quit before time does its work. Now here is the part that ties everything together. The part that recontextualizes everything you just heard. The Wharton MBA who knew everything about finance and went broke anyway was not failing because of a knowledge gap. He was failing because his psychological wiring was running software that was incompatible with the strategy his intellect had designed. He knew what to do. His habits, his emotional responses, his mental accounting, his status anxiety, his loss aversion, they were all running a completely different program underneath the intellectual one. And the investor who knew half of what he knew and bought their second home. They were not smarter. They were just psychologically aligned with their own strategy in a way he was not. Their wiring supported their behavior. His wiring undermined it. Morgan Housel, who wrote The Psychology of Money, put it in a single sentence that I want you to remember for the rest of your life. Doing well with money has little to do with how smart you are and everything to do with how you behave. Behavior. Not intelligence. Not information. Not strategy. The person who wins financially in 2026 is not the person with the best investment thesis. It is the person who can consistently act in alignment with their future at the expense of their present. Who can hold an investment through a 40% drawdown while the financial media announces the end of capitalism? Who can resist the status purchase that would feel good for a week and cost them a decade of compounding? Who can automate their savings before their brain has a chance to reclassify that money as available for spending? That person does not need to be brilliant. They need to be consistent. And consistent is something any brain can become, if it understands what it is fighting against. The man from Wharton eventually figured this out. He stopped optimizing his portfolio and started auditing his psychology. He did not change his investment strategy. He changed the conditions under which he made investment decisions. He automated everything he could. He He removed himself from daily market data. He stopped comparing his portfolio to other people's. He made the behavioral changes that his knowledge had always told him to make, but his psychology had always overridden. 3 years later, for the first time in his life, he had more money than he needed. Not because he learned something new, because he finally stopped fighting himself. The question is not whether you know what to do with money. You probably already do. The question is whether the version of you that makes decisions at 8 in the evening when you are tired and the app is offering free delivery and the market just dropped 2% is the same version of you that knows what to do. If those two versions of you are different people, that gap is the only financial problem you actually have. Drop a comment and tell me honestly, which psychological bias do you catch yourself falling into most often? Loss aversion, status spending, mental accounting, overconfidence. I check every comment on this channel and I want to know which one is costing you the most right now. If this video made something click that never clicked before, give it a thumbs up and share it with one person who thinks their money problem is about money. Subscribe to Rich Habits. The next video is going to go somewhere even darker. You are not ready for it.